Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Valley to Vietnam. Today our guest is Marine Tom McTernan. Tom, thanks for your service.
Bob, thanks.
Tom was with the 1st Marine Division in I Corps of Vietnam and grew up here in Sacramento. But Tom, you were born in San Francisco. How was it that your family was living in San Francisco?
My grandparents and my parents were born in San Francisco and raised in San Francisco. So.
And you didn't live there long?
No, my parents moved to Sacramento when I was 4 months old, over there on Mission Avenue.
Okay.
Off of El Camino, between El Camino and Marconi.
And I lived on Mission at one time.
Did you?
Yeah, right next to Star King School. But eventually you lived on Cody Way.
Correct.
I know that street well. It's where my girlfriend in my senior year of high school lived, and I believe you knew her. And one of my best buddies, Ron Harvey, now deceased.
Ron is deceased?
Yeah. Yeah, he died last year of cancer. You knew the Kellys, and you knew the rest of the people that I talked about, and probably a lot more. What do you remember most about growing up in Sacramento?
Summers.
Yeah. No school. And
no school.
Doing all kinds of things. And what sort of places did you hang out?
Country Club Plaza.
Yeah, that was real close to you.
Absolutely. Country Club Bowl, Sam's Hofbrau,
Right.
Del Paso Country Club.
You weren't a rich kid, were you?
Not really.
But
Not
Del Paso, that was pretty
exclusive.
hoity-toity.
It was, and it is, I guess.
Still is, yeah.
My father had a membership through his employer,
Okay.
and
And you swam there?
I swam there.
Yeah.
I was on their swimming and diving team.
Okay. See, us poor kids, we would just sneak in there late at night, and they didn't have any security, and we'd go swim in the pool until they threw us out.
Cool.
But that was fun, yeah.
If you would have gotten a hold of me, I would have taken you as a guest.
There you go. See, but that wouldn't have been any fun. I didn't like to do things the legal way. And did you drag K Street at all?
I know everybody cruised.
Cruised it.
Yeah, K Street.
Yeah, it's a big thing. Both. K Street went west, and both J and L went east. And so you'd go down one and come back one side, and then you'd go back down K and come back down the other side. So,
ironically, the only ticket I got from down there was for an illegal right turn.
oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably staring at some girls or whatever.
Oh, maybe.
And then we'd go to Mel's Drive-In down there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that was the place.
I think it was Harvey's on Fulton Avenue.
Yeah,
Yep.
Harvey's, I remember that. We stayed away from that. It was mostly an Encina High School place.
I didn't care.
We had Tasty Freeze across from the bowling alley there that we'd go to. But so you went to Sacramento schools, grammar school and high school. You went to Del Paso Manor School.
Correct.
And Orville Wright.
Correct.
Me too.
Orville
Art
Wright?
school. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Mr. Ashworth?
I think I remember that name, yeah. Yeah, I went to 6th and 7th grade there.
Okay.
And then I went to Star King, you went to Art.
Yep.
And then we both went to El Camino High School, which probably produced the most brilliant kids in the whole Sacramento area.
Unquestionably.
Yeah. I know it was a real college prep course. Well, actually, there were a few others that competed, like 14 or something.
A lot of snobs, too.
Yeah. At El Camino.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. There was a real division there between the kids that came from Arden Oaks and
Absolutely.
all that area. What do you remember most about El Camino? Well, the stuff.
Yeah. I was kind of a quiet kid. It wasn't one of the popular in-crowd types. In fact, I pretty much rejected the popularity contests and everything else. So And El Camino had its share of snobs.
Right.
So it was what it was.
Hey, you belong to Del Paso Country Club, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm just kidding.
And nobody from El Camino knew that.
Right. You also mentioned to me earlier that you'd go to concerts down the Memorial Auditorium. Who would you see there?
I remember one in particular. It was the Beach Boys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a fellow who was a promoter from the high school. He said the first concert, he arranged it. The Beach Boys got paid $250, which they split among them. He picked them up at the airport, the old airport, you know, out on Freeport, in his mother's station wagon, and then he took them back and they stayed at some dumpy hotel downtown or whatever.
That's the way it was.
Yeah. I remember the Rolling Stones played there.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, Ronnie Wood was almost electrocuted by a poorly wired microphone and hit the stage, and they had to revive him.
What year was that?
Oh, geez, it'd probably be about 65. Yeah, right in there. Yeah, I'm just guessing. I mean, a lot of that time I was gone either to college or in the Army, so I'm not sure. It wasn't when I was living here. You graduated high school in 1965.
Correct.
Your father passed away that year.
No, he passed away in June of '64.
Oh, so a whole year before.
Yeah, that had a major impact.
And how
on me?
How did
The loss. I didn't handle it well.
Yeah. And he died of what? Aneurysm?
Lung cancer.
Oh.
And so 63, he went a year with the illness,
Right.
and slowly deteriorated. I used to visit him after school almost on a daily basis in the hospital. But that had a major impact on me as far as caring about anything.
Yeah. And this put a big burden on your mother.
Oh, absolutely. There was six kids.
Oh, wow.
3 of us. It was almost as if we were in 2 groups of 3.
Yeah.
There was a gap between my younger sister and I was the youngest of the older 3.
Okay.
So my older brother and sister, they were ready to move out, and I was a year away. It was the last day of school, my junior year, that he passed away. So all she really needed to do was focus on the 3 younger kids, the youngest of which was about 3 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank God she had she was an RN. She had a nursing career available to her to survive.
Sure. You came out of high school and you decided to join the Marine Corps.
One month after graduating from high school, I was in Marine Corps boot camp at MCRD San Diego.
So what was MCRD like?
Hell.
Everybody says that. Everybody says, "Oh well, it was a breeze," you know.
You know, the joke of the matter was that was the easy part. as it turned out, it got a lot worse.
Yeah, I know. Once you finished training, you were assigned to Mike Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division. And so let's talk about you first arriving in Vietnam.
Clueless.
Yeah.
I mean, I had received extensive training, but nothing prepares you for that. Physically, I was in great shape, but psychologically, it's almost as if you're being led to slaughter.
Right. And the Marines, of course, had the highest casualties of any units over there.
Every individual, just as with civilian life, weren't always Marines or weren't always soldiers or sailors or airmen. And when they join a particular branch of service, they bring with them certain qualities and liabilities through how they were raised, how they were brought up. But something like combat that goes beyond the comprehension of anyone. The total lack of humanity that exists, the value system that qualifies you to be there while trying to survive at the same time. It's like it's in a different dimension.
Right.
It's a different world, and nobody on this planet can possibly understand that hasn't actually been there.
Right.
That's why individuals that were actually boots on the ground and in combat may display an elevated level of emotion at various points, which they try and protect.
Right.
Because they can seem rather hard and insensitive on the outside. They have a shell around them. But in reality, those individuals are very soft and very emotional on the inside. Mm-hmm. And you can tell who were boots on the ground, who actually saw combat, by picking up on that, if you're paying close enough attention. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, one of the earliest people that we interviewed here was 18-year-old whose father was a professional baseball player. He had a lot of natural, athletic ability. He was a great golfer. And he says to go over at 18 and suddenly become a machine gunner on a Huey, and he was wounded a couple of times and was up in the air every single day. And he said, that's such a weird transition. He said, but the hardest transition was coming back.
Absolutely.
And trying to adapt.
Not knowing enough to realize what you don't know was paramount in my particular case. Having lost my dad, though, the year before, I didn't care about anything. And I joined at the same time as a high school buddy. His father made sure that he got a guaranteed for aviation, and he became a helicopter mechanic. When the recruiter asked me what specialty I wanted to go into, I told him, put me where you need me. And it was the infantry.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it just threw me right straight into the snake pit.
Infantry is it. And the Marine Corps, their tours, instead of being a year, they're 13 months.
Correct.
You get an extra month to try to get killed.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned that you were on 34 air assault missions.
Correct.
And you flew in those old Sikorskis that were kind of slow.
Absolutely.
And big and nice targets. And I take it that these ships would take a lot of rounds just as you're heading to be inserted someplace.
Absolutely. I remember the first operation. It was Operation Texas. And it was in, I think it was March 18th, 1966. And I was in the first wave, and we were dropped into an open rice paddy area. And the 2nd NVA division in Quang Ngai province, near Chu Lai, South Vietnam, was who we were fighting against.
And they were in the tree line, probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They were well concealed. Anyway, they loaded us on the helicopters in July, and we took off. And I thought to myself, oh, this is kind of fun, you know.
Nice breeze.
And, yeah, I looked out the door, you know, past the door gunner, and I'm looking down, and it's green, and I thought, well, that'd be a great place for a 18-hole golf course and country club, and
Just like home.
just like home.
Yeah.
I mean, clueless. This is the first one.
Yeah.
And then when we got within a mile or two from our landing zone, I started hearing rounds zip by, and I thought, "What's this? Shoo, shoo. What's this?"
Yeah.
And I looked over at this machine gunner. We call him Dirty Dave, and he started smiling. Probably because he was looking at the unknowingly naive look on the rest of our faces. And as we got closer, it intensified until we started descending, and it got heavier and heavier and heavier. And then the helicopter didn't even land. I mean,
Right.
we're carrying about 100, 150 pounds on our backs. And we're jumping out of this thing about 10, 15 feet off the deck into mud, yes, a rice paddy. And yeah, the rest of that, I read later that as additional waves of Marines were coming in, and it was in the early evening, a fire team from Kilo Company who came in behind us. Apparently the old Sikorsky got hit by a large caliber round and lit up like a flare. And I think it turned upside down. Everybody in the helicopter died. And I know I would have had to have witnessed it, but I don't remember. I can't remember anything about it.
And what was the approximate capacity of a Sikorsky?
Well, there was the pilot and co-pilot who sat up above the cabin. And then I think they fit 5 or 6 of us in there.
Yeah.
In the cabin.
So what happened for the rest of that day? Or a period of time?
Well,
that you were in?
the night, which I don't remember, we waited until the next morning to advance towards that tree line where all the fire was coming from, and ran into very light resistance. And then everything's in a snapshot.
Yeah.
There's so much of it that I can't remember.
Were you calling in artillery or air on that tree line at all? Or?
Oh, the one thing I do remember, I guess the NVA were trying to flank us.
Oh.
And I remember looking over to my right and up, and they were the size of a pinhead. They were jet fighters. And they were up about 22,000 feet. And all of a sudden, they go into their dive. And they're coming down at warp speed at, probably at about a 70-degree angle. And as they approached 10,000 feet, maybe a little bit less, they'd open up with their machine guns and Gatling guns and rockets and everything they had. And as they reached the bottom of their descent, and we could always tell who was married and who was single. And then the Marine aviators, I mean, they were crazy.
Yeah.
Because they'd wait later to pull up. But as they pull up, they drop their napalm, and you'd see the napalm hit. And what they were doing was they were covering our flanks to where the NBA were trying to
Flank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it was like a ballet.
And that was
It
your
amazing.
first. That was your first big battle.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And how many more did you have like that? Too many to
About
count?
30, about 33.
Yeah.
So, you know, some were as intense and some weren't.
Right.
You know, it depended upon who took the point of the spear.
Sure. And every company or platoon would take their turn.
Well, they were multi-battalion,
Okay.
regimental, multi-regimental.
Big units.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were fighting divisions.
Yeah.
You know, the first, out of curiosity, years ago, Hollywood's made all sorts of movies about Vietnam.
Sure.
And the first one I saw was The Deer Hunter. And I was repulsed by it. I mean, that was nothing like it. And then I was afraid to watch Platoon.
Right.
And I've never watched that in its entirety. The one movie that I saw that I could best relate to, Full Metal Jacket, that was in Way City, and we were loaded up on trucks, and we were supposed to go up there, but at the last minute, they switched us out for the 5th Marine Regiment, which Full Metal Jacket was based on. I lost my train of
Wait,
thought.
what movies?
The one that I could identify the most with as far as the air assaults and the intensity was that Mel Gibson movie, We Were Soldiers. That pretty much depicted the intensity of it, the complete exhaustion afterwards. And when we'd go on those, we had no idea where they were taking us. I know they dropped us in the Central Highlands extensively. Yeah.
I read that book. I met the author at Galloway and spent almost an hour with him one day when he was here in Sacramento. Great author. Really a fantastic book.
The ridiculousness that he saw in the media after the battle, the disconnect, was priceless.
My only problem with the movie was they filmed it at Camp Roberts
I
in
know.
Oak and Chaparral, and I said, "Come on, guys, that's not what Vietnam looks like."
No,
okay?
it is
But
not.
other than that, I thought
that was my criticism of it.
And you had those huge open fields of fire
And oak trees.
and it's not even rice paddies. I mean, just these huge open areas.
Yeah.
But my buddy who was in the 101st, he's a big fan of Hamburger Hill, which is pretty god awful. But
I
he
never
said,
saw that movie.
"Hey, you should see it. It's a tough one to watch."
I avoided a lot of the movie. You know, Hollywood has a tendency to spice things up or to alter reality in order to, I guess, sell movies.
Right.
And they lose something
Yeah.
through their lack of understanding and interpretation.
I think you're going to get a lot better understanding if you watch something like on the military channel, and they do these actual films of actual battles.
Documentaries.
Are really well done. You were there, of course, during Tet, because that was Way. Way was overrun and taken and had to be taken back. So did you notice a big change in things when Tet occurred?
Not particularly.
It's just bad all the time, huh? Well, up in I-Corps, it was a whole different world.
You know, when you politicize, if you speak to anyone that's been on the ground, war is not political. In fact, it's about as politically incorrect as you can possibly get. And when you bring politics into war, a retired gunnery sergeant once gave me the definition of war as: war is when diplomacy fails, and not until then. And when diplomacy fails and you're given no other alternative, then there's no room for diplomacy while it's going on. It's ugly, it's nasty. Most people probably can't handle it as far as the reality of it. I look at the people in this country as living in a big giant bubble, and they don't get it.
And even a smaller portion of the population is fighting now than Vietnam.
That absolutely, but that is, there's here and there's there. That's reality. To somebody that's been there, that's reality, and most people just don't get it.
I think I was just brought up Tet simply because they made such a surge at that time and decided to take all those cities, and so in a lot of places that weren't having a lot of heavy combat. I mean, that's the whole length of the country.
And that's why I brought in the political aspects of that war. Mm-hmm. Rules of engagement.
I knew you were going there.
Bob, there can't be any rules of engagement. And we were given rules of engagement during TED. It is the most ridiculous policy that can ever be given to any kind of combat troop. You're putting their lives in danger. You're putting their very survival in danger. There are no rules of engagement. When you're fighting an enemy that has no rules of engagement, but they're put on you, you're going to die. You're going to die.
And you saw friends die.
Absolutely, but in order to survive, we would sometimes modify or amend those rules of engagement, and that's probably one of the reasons why I'm here today. Yeah. It's safe to assume that if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and it's carrying an AK-47, but it hasn't gotten a chance to shoot at you yet, you take it out, Ted or not.
Right. Were you wounded?
Am I a Purple Heart recipient?
Well, I've talked to a lot of guys saying, I have a friend who said, well, I was wounded 5 different times, but I don't have a Purple Heart. But
You want the story?
sure, hit it.
Amazingly enough, I was brought up strict Irish Catholic. I'm 100% Irish. Where were we going?
Wounded.
Wounded. Oh, yeah, that. At times I thought I must have had a guardian angel. At times I felt my deceased father, or perhaps my grandfather, my great-grandfather, or some ancestor was there and watching over me. There were events that took place that are totally unexplainable. And this one particular day, we took our platoon commander, and we had a corpsman, and we had a radio man on a squad-size patrol. Usually the platoon commanders wouldn't. He was a first lieutenant. Wouldn't go on a day patrol,
Right.
let alone a night patrol. But this was a day patrol, and someone, for some reason or another, I used to like to take the point position on all the patrols because I was really good at detecting or picking up on tripwires, booby traps.
Right.
Because it was usually the point or the second person in the column that would trip these wires, and then because of a delay, it would hit the center of the column, which was where your most valuable, like the squad leader, the corpsman, the radio man would be located.
Right.
Anyway, this particular day, I didn't take point. I think I was second from the last person. And a booby trap went off. And it wasn't your typical grenade, you know, a tripwire connected to a,
Right.
you know, the ring, the
Sure.
pin to a grenade. And it was big.
It wasn't a bouncing Betty. This is
No, I don't think.
maybe
no.
an artillery shell rig.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Anyway, the concussion was such, and I was close, well, obviously I was close enough, but the concussion was such that I blacked out. But yet I stayed on my feet.
Mm-hmm.
And while I still couldn't see, I made a 90-degree turn outward and was at the ready to open up on whatever it was that
Sure.
hit us. And it was an open rice paddy. But there was no gunfire, small arms fire to follow. And once I refocused, I looked to my right, which was where the majority of the patrol was.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was on the ground. And I looked to my left, and the one person that was behind me was on the ground. I was the only one standing. And as I looked further, or longer, I could tell people were hurt real bad. And the radio man was able to call in the medevacs, the medevac choppers, and there was a couple of them. Anyway, I ended up loading everybody on the medevac choppers, and they flew away. And basically, I was out there about 5 miles from our patrol base alone. And the platoon radio man gave me his radio. It was a PRC 25.
25, yeah.
25.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember it.
Very good.
Yeah, like a steel trap.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went ahead and called our patrol base, and they told me to stay where I was at, and they had my coordinates because of where the choppers landed.
Right.
And I told them, nah, yeah, I know the way home. So I went ahead and I went back, and I was surprised I didn't get picked off.
By your own men.
Yeah, alone. I mean, hey, this is
I
easy.
know.
This is a soft target.
Right.
But when I got back, we had another corpsman, and he told me to strip down. And I'm thinking, what? This guy wants to see me naked or something? But he told me to strip down, and I said, why? What for? He says, well, because I want to check you to see if you got hit and where you got hit
Right.
and what you got hit with. And I told him to go to hell. Um, because what he wanted to do was recommend me for the Purple Heart. And that was bad luck. Okay, I mean, if you got hit and you were well enough to walk, I mean, it meant you were going to get hit twice as bad or 3 times as bad not long after that. So anyway, he told me what he was up to, and I told him to go to hell. But years later, shrapnel was coming up to just under the surface of the skin.
Right.
And I was picking it out of my thighs. So apparently I did get hit that day, but as far as getting shot, no, never did. I guess I was too skinny.
Shrapnel counts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, how can you possibly accept being hit by a few pieces of shrapnel and accepting a Purple Heart when you just got done loading an entire squad who may have very well have ended up losing limbs? I mean, that cheapens the whole purpose behind the Purple Heart.
See, I totally understand this. My father was in World War II with the 82nd Airborne, was wounded 3 times, and what would have been his 4th Purple Heart, or 4th oak leaf cluster, he was blown off a cliff by mortar round, and then slammed on this paved road down below, and chipped his vertebrae on his back, and had some shrapnel, and they put him in the hospital, and he looked around, and he says, I walked out of there. And never recorded that wound. And he says, I had to eventually give up skiing because of that chipped vertebrae, but he said, I saw those people missing limbs and horrible wounds and blinded and all that, and he said, you know what, I'm okay. So
Have you observed a certain level of humility from combat troops?
Oh, sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
With a strong sense of service and putting others before themselves?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I'm talking about. Or the corpsman.
Right.
That you spoke of earlier,
Yeah.
that chose to have the bandages used on others rather than him after
He
he
was
got
the
hit.
most severely wounded.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now you see that all the time, and you hear that all the time. I'm still in contact, with nearly a little over 100 of the guys I went through infantry officer candidate school with. That is just repeated all the time. You're not fighting so much for your country, you're fighting for your guys and to keep them alive, and they're fighting to keep you alive.
Corporal Michael Carroll.
Yeah. We're going to talk about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize this is probably a tough story for you to tell, so you just...
Possibly.
Just take your
Possibly.
time.
It depends upon whether I can remain
Okay.
disconnected or not.
I'm right here for you.
He was from, I think he was a little older than I was. He was probably 20, 21 years old, from New York. He was a squad leader, and we were on an island position, the platoon. Normally, a squad leader is a sergeant,
Right.
but
E5.
E5, but he was a corporal E4, and the reason being is we were short on sergeants.
Right.
We were so short on
Everything.
platoon commanders. Yeah, because our platoon commander, which is normally a lieutenant, was a staff sergeant at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about kids. I mean, just out of high school.
Yeah.
So you have these professional infantry people, well-trained, just out of high school. Physically, they might be in their prime as far as purpose is concerned, yet their minds are still that of an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Kind of goofy, laughing at some of the dumbest things.
So what was Carroll like?
He was a little more mature, a year or two. He was a little more mature. That was probably why he was a squad leader. But anyway, we were goofing off, and Doc Snyder, big Swede, would love to know where he's at now. He was a Navy corpsman that was attached to us. We were goofing off one evening, and Doc Snyder hypnotized Mike and made him cluck like a chicken, and just did some crazy stuff with a flame.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was dark. But Mike was scheduled to go out on a night patrol that evening, and about 2,300 hours, 11 p.m. at night. And anyway, he did. And maybe an hour into after he left, a voice was heard on the radio, the PRC 25. Help! Help me! Help! And we asked where they were at, because it could have been a trap too. And they couldn't tell us.
They didn't know, or they just didn't have the energy to tell you?
They didn't know. They didn't know. Anyway, this young private, a while later, came running back to our patrol base, and he was a member of the squad,
Right.
Mike's squad. And that was another time when we lost another lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we had these amphibious vehicles called Amtraks that were attached to us.
I've never seen those.
Do you?
Yeah.
Like a big box.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the front had dropped down. Anyway, real slow in the water. Yeah, you're a sitting duck.
Yeah, it looked like a marine vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, kind of like the Sikorsky's. Yeah, slow in the air.
Okay.
Anyway, we hopped on the Amtraks and had this kid show us where he came from.
Huh.
And when we got there, we lit up the area pretty well. And the next image was Mike sitting, leaning up against a tree trunk, and his legs were wrapped around his head, and they were only held on by a couple of tendons, and he's sitting in his own pool of blood.
Yikes.
Both legs. And he's obviously, he's alive, but not for long. I mean, he's minutes away from expiring. And we were real close with Mike. And when we saw him like that, Doc Snyder turned to me, because he had to conduct triage. And Doc Snyder turned to me and said, "There's nothing I can do for him. I got to tend to the others. There's nothing I can do." And I know to this day, wherever Doc Snyder is, he's still living in that hell.
Sure.
That he could not save Mike that night. And Mike's on the wall in Washington, D.C., or any replica of the wall.
Right.
Mike's name is on that wall.
And he died while you were there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was worse than that patrol that I was the only survivor from. And my main objective was to try and get medevac choppers in, and to get everybody help as quickly as possible, and to try and help Doc as much as possible. But after it was over and everybody was extracted, all the injured were extracted, I remember riding back to our patrol base on top of the Amtrak, and it was the only time during that 13 months that I broke down crying. It was the only time. I had built a shell, and what's also interesting is you can take these kids, and I'm talking about today too. I'm talking about the Middle East. This applies.
Right.
And these kids are coming back screwed up. But you build a shell around yourself, as far as emotion is concerned. But that was so bad that it penetrated that shell.
Okay.
And I discovered that while I was there, that I had to turn my back on my strict Catholic upbringing, which I started to bring up earlier. I probably lost my train of thought because I shoot all over the place. But you have to put all that on the back burner in order to survive. And I discovered, and I tried to explain it to my son, who's now career Army. He's a master sergeant, E8. I think he's up for E9. He's somewhere over there. He's with a special operations unit. But I explained to him, he's done, one tour in the Baltics as soon as he went into the Army.
Right.
He was attached to the 82nd Airborne back then. He was in on the initial invasion of Afghanistan after 9/11, after we got hit. He was in on the initial invasion of Iraq and did like 4 more tours in Iraq. Of a year, one, he extended 6 months and stayed there and remained there for 18 months. He started liking it. Something wrong with that boy. But I explained to him very early on, being a parent, and I was a wreck, knowing he was over there.
Sure.
Now I don't worry so much.
Yeah?
No.
That's good.
No. He's very, very well trained, and he's with a group of people that you don't hear about often getting hurt. But getting back, I tried to tell him early on that you have to take, we're all born with certain senses. Primitive senses. Call it what you want. 6 senses of intensified smell, taste, motion. And you have to tap into those animal instincts that we're all born with, but it's not necessary to use in order to survive.
Right.
And out of the first 7 years he was in the Army, he spent 5 of them in combat zones.
Yeah. So the longer you're in combat, the longer you're going to have those senses.
Yeah, but you asked earlier, I don't know if we're running out of time or not. You asked earlier about coming back.
That's what was going to be my next question.
And what's, well, I'm a little ahead of you.
Yeah, really.
Coming back and what it's like returning. From my perspective at the time, I never made it. Meaning, the home I left and the home I returned to was so incredibly different. And it took me decades to discover how. The war was very unpopular. People spit on soldiers, Marines returning, calling them baby killers and mother rapers and father rapers. That didn't help. And I was bitter for years about that. Bitter, angry. But it wasn't home that changed, it was me.
Yeah, exactly. You know, in a year,
And it took me
it's not
decades
gonna
to figure
change
that
much.
out. You know?
It was definitely you.
It was, yeah, and it took decades to discover that.
Yeah.
It took years. And finally I realized. And the life that you live, I tell you what, anybody that wants to join the Marine Corps, is it an adventure? Oh, absolutely, especially in the infantry. It's a way of life. It's not an MOS.
Military occupational specialty.
It's a way of life. Nobody lives a lower quality of life than a Marine infantryman. You're homeless for the entire time that you're in combat. Your dwelling consists of a poncho. That's the roof over your head. You're out in the elements. You're eating, well, I ate sea rations. Now they've got these delicacies called MREs.
They're not much better.
Ham and lima beans. We used to call them ham and mothers. That's the clean version.
Yeah, right. But those peaches, those are nice.
Those were nice.
Highly valued.
My favorite was the ham and eggs chop because I had Mom send me Tabasco sauce to kill the taste.
Sure, a lot of guys carried that little bottle of Tabasco sauce.
Oh,
in
absolutely.
One of their ammo pouches.
Oh, absolutely. But it's a way of life, and does it teach you humility? Oh, you bet. But there's also growth in adversity.
Sure.
And you grow.
There's also regression. You know,
Absolutely.
in that, you know, what you've experienced is so overwhelming that it can greatly affect you. I mean, you look at all this high suicide rate of guys coming back from Afghanistan. You know.
I probably shouldn't share this, but for the longest time, there were periods when things in life weren't going so well. And it was difficult at times, but there were times when that entered my mind on a daily basis. And I didn't understand why. There's a huge amount of guilt, shame, paranoia, hypersensitivity. There's a long list of side effects from PTSD. I have friends that are huge advocates of it. It can be a deadly affliction.
How long did it take for you to actually get diagnosed as having PTSD?
Oh, sadly enough, I was diagnosed with it in, I think it was 2010.
Oh my God.
And V awarded me, I think, 20% 2010 or 2011. And it can be quite debilitating. I had a career in banking
25 years.
for 25 years, yes, from 1970 to 1985. No, 1995.
Right.
And I remember receiving sterling reviews, annual evaluations, until I got to that last place that I was at in a consumer loan center. This was the first bank that I worked for. I won't mention any names. Anyway, it was kind of like going from the penthouse to the Kmart or Walmart of banking.
Right.
And it was the result of the bank downsizing. And I was either out of a job or I could accept this position at this consumer loan center.
I had a bunch of friends who went through that big bank crash in the early 90s, and they were out looking for jobs.
Yeah, well, this was in 80. This was
Could have
in,
been the 80s.
Yeah, this was in 84,
Yeah.
84, 85, anyway. But I remember this supervisor that gave me an evaluation, and it was like 180 degrees from all the other evaluations, and he's picking me apart. And he's going through all these things that are deficient. And up until that point, and that was, I spent like 15 years with this first outfit. And up to that point, everything was sterling.
Right.
So I thought, okay, is it me?
Or is it him?
Or is it him?
Right.
So after he got done, he pushes the review over to me, and he told me to sign it. And I spent the next 15 minutes telling him not only was he a failure as a supervisor, right, and a manager, but he was a total failure as a human being. And if he would have interrupted me, I was totally prepared to throw him out the third-story window. Really.
Yeah.
I wasn't there much longer. I got fired. I don't understand why. I got fired.
Wow.
And they wouldn't even let me collect unemployment insurance.
Jeez.
So, but I found another job.
And then eventually you go into law enforcement.
Yes.
And so you were in the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department for 15
15 years.
15 years.
Yeah.
There, at least you had a gun, so if you had a
Well,
supervisor who disagreed with you, you just kidding.
I recognized I was older.
Yeah.
I worked there from the age of 48 to 63.
Oh.
But I recognized certain parameters and limitations by that time. And realized that I needed to pull it back a bit.
Right.
So I maintained control quite well.
So,
but I couldn't go for help because anybody with PTSD in law enforcement, I mean, my God, I mean, people with PTSD, I mean, they must be crazy.
Right.
Well, not exactly, but
well, I mean,
it could be an asset too.
Yeah, you could get PTSD just in law enforcement. You know,
oh, absolutely.
without being in combat.
Well, and the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department started recognizing that because they had one young lady who was ambushed, and then two male deputies who were ambushed up in Diamond Springs, I think. Both males are retired now, and she ended up killing herself. She had it bad, and I told her, Melissa Meekma, and I ran into her just a couple of days before she committed suicide, that she and I needed to talk, and I gave her a big hug. And I remember holding her, whispering to her, Melissa, we need to talk. Because I recognized it. I knew what it was. And I wanted so much to help her. She says, and at the time she said, oh yeah. 2 days later she was dead.
Wow.
PTSD is nothing to mess around with yet. I miraculously survived. Full blown. I'm now 100%.
You're rated at 100%? Wow.
Yeah, it really interferes with your life. I didn't come close to realizing my full potential in banking. Or in law enforcement. I'm retired now, but it's something that can interfere severely
Sure.
with individuals' lives. Nobody understood it. When somebody implied the first time that there may have been something wrong with me. I was a Marine.
You're supposed to be tough and just eat it, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's sissies.
Yeah.
People, you have people that are very strong and people that aren't so strong. People that will buckle or fold up under extreme pressure.
We saw those kind of guys in John Wayne movies.
Absolutely,
Yeah, there you go.
absolutely. Actually, I saw.
Yeah, guys in real life.
I saw guys like that in the Marine Corps, and I hope they work things out. But yeah, I mean, we're all built differently.
Well, Tom, I want to thank you for coming in today. This was a terrific interview. You're a hero to me, and
My
I'm
pleasure.
real proud
And
of
I'm
you.
flattered.
And proud to know you. But thank you for your service. This concludes another episode of Valley to Vietnam. Thank you for being with us today, and I hope to see you next time.